Welcome to Undefined, the podcast about the space between evidence and expansion. I'm your host, Lauren Conlon, nutrition coach, counselor in training, and someone who is endlessly curious about nuance. And y'all, I am so excited to share today's episode because it means that I can share that my new study is alive and accepting responses. It is a survey looking at bodybuilding and mental health. So if you are listening between the dates of September 15th and October 13th, 2025, and you fit our inclusion criteria, which I will get to, I would love if you could fill out this survey and be a part of something that I consider pretty cool and hopefully something that will really contribute to the body of literature and help people in real time. So little backstory for everybody, because of course, y'all know I got to give a story. There's always a story with everything. And back in the spring semester, I was in a research class and we essentially had to do the beginning of a study. We had to go through the introduction and the methods and basically do all the stuff up until actually doing the study. So in the introduction, or what's sometimes known as the review of literature, you're basically looking at all of the relevant research in your topic of interest. You're seeing what we know, what we don't know, where there's a gap, and really how your study is going to try to answer one or more of those questions, presented in that gap. So of course I wanted to pick something that I was interested in that I could use for, presentations, for my clients, for my mentorship coaches, all of that. And I was like, we know a lot about bodybuilding and certain things that they are afflicted by. And we also know some things about mental health in terms of those disorders. But is there anything looking at both? And there wasn't. So I was like, well, this would actually be perfect. And I told my professor that I was thinking maybe I could actually make this a real study. And she's on the IRB. So she, we talked through some things and she gave me some great insights and she really graded me pretty tough so I could actually make this a real thing. And then back in March, me and Dr. Campbell were presenting at a conference together. And I was like, hey, crazy idea, but how would you feel about doing research together again? And at this point, he has a really great lab and a really great team. And they had just finished up getting everything ready for the menopause survey that they put out a couple months ago. And doing, when you're doing research, there's all different types. And a survey is very specific in terms of understanding the way the questions need to be laid out, all this kind of stuff. So I knew they had in the trenches training and they just finished that. So it's honestly a perfect time to ask him to do this. So I brought it to the lab and everybody agreed. And it was so great to work with them because one, they're all fantastic. But I came in and I said, hey, here's my self-created survey. And we kept the whole essence of it, but we were able to, adjust things and really put all of our heads together with all of our experience to create a final product that I am so proud of and so thankful that they all wanted to work on this with me. I did not have the capacity to run this all on my own. And it was so great to be able to have help and really see the lab functioning in this kind of a way, because when I was there, it was not like this, which was fine. I loved my experience, which I promise I will do a podcast on that in the future, but it was something that is just totally different than it is now. So really great to work with the team. And we submitted it over the summer, kind of in that lull between summer and fall semester. And obviously it's a survey, so it's pretty easy to get through the IRB in comparison to an intervention-based study. So went through and now here we are. So pumped. So a little backstory. That was the backstory of why I'm doing it. A little backstory in terms of the, how many times can I say backstory? Can we guess? Should we, those things where people are take a shot every time someone says this. So the backstory of the lit review. And, we know, I would say a decent amount about physique competitors. They're certainly not the most studied individuals on the planet, but we have a pretty consistent body of literature. And we do know, of course, that people who do physique competitions suffer more with, disordered eating disorders, body dysmorphia, muscle dysmorphia, substance use issues, and also just in general, personality types that are very rigid, and that can play out in multiple different areas of their life. Now, you're probably listening, and if you are a bodybuilder or you know any bodybuilders, you're going to say, yeah, well, I didn't need a study to know that, because things like muscle and body dysmorphia, bodybuilders are always going to have a higher interest in their body compared to controls no matter what. That is just the reality. You would not be a successful competitor otherwise. You're going to have to display certain rigid behaviors that other people aren't going to have to do. So some of the things are almost a prerequisite for sports success. But as always, it's, if we look at things on a continuum, it's what side of the spectrum, are we on? Is it something that is still adaptive to you and your goals in your life, or is this now becoming maladaptive? And that's always where, mental health is so interesting, because it's not like a yes or no. It's very much like this spectrum and this continuum. So there's a lot of things that we know about bodybuilders. And then separately in the, kind of mental health and counseling literature, we know that certain types of treatment can help more, or has been shown in the literature to help more with certain things. So as an example, with eating disorders or disordered eating, there are certain things like mindfulness-based cognitive therapy that have been shown to be more useful for this population. Now, as always, what is most important is always the client and counselor relationship. That therapeutic relationship is everything. So that is always number one. Number two is the person in front of you is always most important. So when we're talking about a one-on-one or even a group counseling setting, we might go in with how we think we want to, do things, with the lens we're going to approach things. But what actually ends up happening sometimes is different in terms of techniques or the approach that we take, because the client needs something different. So that's where practice is always going to differ from research. But in general, we can look to the research and say, oh, wow, this was really useful with this population versus other types of therapy. So things like ACT, DBT, mindfulness-based cognitive therapies, those have been shown pretty effective with some of these things that do afflict the physique community more. So, but there was nothing looking at both of them. So I was like, all right, well, this is kind of an interesting thing. And in research, survey data certainly is not the highest by any means, but it's still a good launching place to start to see where are some of these correlations, and that can help, in my mind, be a springboard for future intervention research. Now, what's hard about bodybuilding, there's a lot of things that are hard about bodybuilding research. Obviously, it's a smaller population than the general population. That's one thing, but it's so specific to the individual. So you could say, hey, I want to do a 16-week intervention study for someone's prep. Well, someone might be only needing 12 weeks to prep, and someone else might need 24 weeks to prep. So how do we do that? Whereas other research could be hey, we're doing a 16-week, mindfulness-based cognitive training for, disordered eating clients versus a control. Okay, great, fantastic. Can't really do that with bodybuilding because it's not as, cut and dry because of the actual competition date and how those differ so much. So in my mind, again, this is September of 2025, maybe in a year or two I'll be thinking differently, but if an intervention study was to happen, it would have to be something for every X amount of weeks someone's in prep, they get a therapy session. Because really my end goal of this is trying to see, do therapeutic interventions mitigate some of the psychological distress that physique competitors go through? And there's just undeniable demands of the sport that are psychological and physiological, and those are very much intertwined. And while contest prep itself is very challenging, it's not the only challenging period. Post-competition, I would argue, and have always argued, is probably the hardest time. So there's so many layers and so much nuance here, but thinking in the future, that's kind of how I feel like an intervention study would have to be done, because it's not going to be able to be this many weeks, cool, check the box. But really what my goal is to try to gather information from this survey to see what are some of the things that have helped, or what are some of the things that maybe you're contributing to this. So the study is going to be broken down into several different components. And the first one is just going to be, basic kind of demographic information. Then it's going to be looking at competition history and things like, have you had a coach? What divisions do you compete in? Are you amateur, pro? How many shows? All those types of questions. And then it's going to go into more of the mental health related questions as well as the substance questions. So, asking about different diagnoses, asking about different types of meds or other substances. And the way that survey-based research works is that typically like there's going to be questions that everybody's going to answer, but then sometimes if you say like yes to this, then another one will pop up. If you say no, a different one will pop up. So we're really looking at, getting more like inside dive into why, okay, somebody has done therapy. If yes, what types of therapy have they done? If they haven't done therapy, what are some of the reasons why they haven't done that? And what will be cool is that at the end of this, when we go through all the statistics, which I will certainly not be doing, that is part of having the team, because your girl knows her limitations and stats is one of them. But after we go through all of that, we're going to be able to see, okay, 50%, 60% of the individuals who responded to our survey, they didn't go to therapy, and here are the top 3 reasons why. Like, that's going to be really cool, practical information that even if a follow-up study is not done, we're going to have more insight and more information that we can share and potentially change how services are perceived, how they're accessible, and all of that. And then there's also going to be a component that is just qualitative and asking questions about like, relationships, mood and affect, body image, and how all of that has changed as a result of competing, and not just during, but specific things of like before, during, and after. So going into this, I don't necessarily have a hypothesis. I might have some inklings or ideas of what we're going to see, but it's really not about that. It is simply about gathering more data, more information, love, more questions, like question. Like that's just like my favorite thing. So surveys are great for this because you can get so much and you can see the different relationships between the different variables. And I am just so excited that this is finally coming together. So as promised, the inclusion criteria, which I'm pumped about this because a lot of times studies are very hard to run because the inclusion criteria has to be very specific. And also, of course, if you're doing an in-person study, that is going to limit you to the surrounding area and people's schedules, et cetera, et cetera. So survey, this is going to be done in 15 to 20 minutes, so not a lot of your time. So the only inclusion criteria are that you're between the ages of 18 to 65 and that you have done at least one bodybuilding show, meaning you have walked on the stage and you have walked off of the stage. Doesn't matter if you get first place, last place, you could have done one show 20 years ago, or you could have done 30 shows and are still actively competing right now. And that is the beauty of this. And that's why I'm excited that we can hopefully get a lot of numbers, because the more numbers, the better, because it gives a better representation of the sample. And of course, I'm not, totally delulu to think that every person who's ever done a bodybuilding show is going to hear about this and do the study, but the more numbers we can get, the better. So I'm really, really hopeful that we will be able to get a large sample size and make some pretty great, hopefully, discoveries. And like I said, the main thing here is I would love if an intervention study came out of this potentially, or that was like a springboard for someone. But even if not, we're still going to be able to take some of the things that we learn, and y'all know I'm going to be sharing it. So we are going to be able to directly impact people's lives from, podcast. Hopefully I'll be able to get the study open access and, be able to get in the hands of, individuals who are competing, in, coaches' hands, in, mental health professionals' hands. Like, I just want this to be something that can really help everybody directly. So if you are listening and you are like, hey, I fit that inclusion criteria, I would love for you to take the 15 to 20 minutes to fill this out. And if you do not, if you have not done that, but you know someone in your life, I would love if you would share this link with them. I'm going to put the link to the survey below. And also, if anybody has, access to like a gym or workplace where they could hang a flyer, I also do have flyers available with a QR code. So feel free to drop a comment or email me at lauren@usf.edu. Nope, that's not my email. That's not the email. laurenconlon@usf.edu. Then you will be able to, I can send it to you with the printout with the QR code, or anything else to share, because I want to get this in as many hands as possible. So please, y'all, help me with this. I am terrible at promoting things. I should be better, but I'm not. But I'm going to be promoting the absolute hell out of this because I am very proud of what myself and the team have put together. And ultimately, I really want to be able to help a lot of people with this and bring more awareness to this side of the sport. So thank you so much for listening. Please let me know and reach out if you have any questions about this, but feel free to check out the show notes and the link below to fill out the survey.